Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So, there's a lot of negative out there, right? And that does make sense because often the most newsworthy events, well, they're things that are anti-consumer or maybe bear ill tidings. 2019 was a turbulent year, absolutely, with more negative stories and bad behavior to call out than I think any of us would have actually liked. But it was also, frankly, an incredible year for games, and that is what we are going to talk about today. There are incredible games, and also a lot of that bad stuff that we pushed back against, well, a lot of it has actually stopped happening. I think we've had so many tremendous wins in the last year of gaming. Now, if you're new here, then hey, we're an indie game studio, more about that down below, and we also do 6 game industry news and analysis videos per week, so if you want more of that content, hit that sub button, and if you'd like to help us out in what we're doing, then hit like for that algorithm, it truly does help. And with that, let's get into the video.
So here's the deal, if you're a fan of almost any genre, you know what, you were pretty well sorted throughout last year. Dozens of major game series got enhanced re-releases or new games, many of which were actually received well, and while the likes of Metacritic and OpenCritic do have their flaws, to simply put the year into numbers, 171 games got a score of 80 or above, 39 over 85 and 9 over 90. That's pretty good in aggregate. January was off to an incredible start, with Ace Combat getting an acclaimed entry, and then Kingdom Hearts 3 finally seeing the light of day. Resident Evil 2 came out, and it pretty much redefined what a remake could actually be. It was faithful to the spirit of the original game in pretty much every way it could, but it had modern gameplay and production values that massively elevated it as an experience. And because of that, it sold over 5 million copies during this year, starting Capcom on what may actually have been their greatest years yet. Then February saw Apex Legends and its surprise release. Yeah, a Respawn Battle Royale critically acclaimed and completely out of left field. And its explosive growth helped to prove that actually strong core mechanics and a focus on quality can really bring people to a game. And that obviously was a win for the millions of players who are still enjoying that game to this day, and it may have really helped to shake things up for EA in terms of their back-end processes. That's something we'll get to later. That's not all though, because February also brought Yakuza to PC. That's of course a part of a long-awaited Japanese PC renaissance. Yes, Japanese games, they're actually coming to PC properly now, which is incredible. There have been so many excellent games also trapped in old hardware that are now being revitalized on PC and having a new audience fall in love with them. Then next, March, well, that brought Devil May Cry 5 and Sekiro to consoles and PC. And those are 2 of the outright best action games to date, not even in 2019, and we had 2 of them in the space of a month. DMC5, that was a long-awaited revival of a series and another part of Capcom's incredible awakening to good games. Turns out, yeah, if you give a storied, reputable team the time and budget to make a proper sequel to their beloved series, they might actually make you a successful game. Really, over the last while, Capcom seem to have learned that more than anyone else, and I sincerely hope that their financial success in recent times inspires more of the industry to create games to that same standard of DMC5 or Monster Hunter World. Then Sekiro is a similar tale. Because of a strong marketing push and an incredible reception, it sold a huge number of copies, and that game is a shining example of excellent combat and a no-holds-barred vision. And as with Capcom, hopefully this reminds the industry that there is profitability in making a standout single-player game on a reasonable budget. Then the next few months saw ports upon ports, something that I think is actually a good trend, where we're seeing older games finding new life on today's platforms. And while some of that can be seen as cash grabs, I would say that more platform-agnostic releases is hardly a bad thing for the industry, especially when they often do release with technical fixes or even feature improvements. Then the middle of the year also heralded excellent indie releases. We had Far Lone Sails, Katana Zero, and Bloodstained. And while Bloodstained isn't exactly unique, it's a crowdfunded revival of Castlevania. That's a series that Konami basically left to die, and it released after a major delay because the backers were vocal about their disappointment in the demo, and that too is a victory in itself, because that game, after the negative feedback, it actually came out to fantastic form to wide acclaim. They listened, and it worked out. Then Far Lone Sales and Katana Zero, they are both excellent examples of unique, memorable experiences that can sometimes slip under gaming culture's radar, but really do exemplify what many of us love about games in the first place. Then past that, and in a somewhat different style, there's extremely niche but well-loved games like Earth Defense Force that had a good year, right? We had a new Western entry on PS4, and finally some PC releases. The industry is growing in reach, and I think we see that even niche titles are making their way to more people who appreciate them. And then actually going back to the broad audiences, Activision found another victory in Crash Team Racing's remaster. Then even MMO players, they had a great year in Final Fantasy XIV's Shadowbringers expansion, which had an insane amount of praise, and more than once, I've heard people say that Shadowbringers' main storyline is actually one of the best mainline Final Fantasy experiences there is, and that is a very high bar indeed. Then, as we go to the latter half of the year, we saw games like Fire Emblem Three Houses take charts and review scores by storm. Remedy's Control comes as a Western example of a more reasonable budget under, strong direction, seeing fantastic results. We also had World of Warcraft Classic appear in August, and that was one hell of a headline grabber. It did absolutely insanely well. Classic is really a great exhibit of players asking, sometimes outright fighting for something, and, showing up in force when that thing was given to them. And in terms of lasting impact, WoW's sub-revenue tripled the month of Classic, and as of the end of Q4 2019, it was double that it was in Q2 2019, which was the quarter before Classic's release. Then it also saw extreme success on Twitch, completely eclipsing Warcraft's previous performance. Then August also saw a tremendous victory for Platinum Games. Astral Chain, their fresh IP in the Switch, released to very strong reviews and eventually broke the million sales mark. And while that game really does suffer from being on Switch, just in terms of the technical capabilities, the hardware, the frame rate, and it's not their best work overall, it's an unapologetic game, and it tries to push action gameplay further than they ever have before, and it was very successful in doing that. If 2019 is in any way representative of the future of action games, then the next generation is going to be beyond belief, because even 2019 was just incredible. Just thinking of August in general, it's insane how many successes there were. Even No Man's Sky Beyond, that appeared in August 2019, and that continued one of the largest redemption stories in gaming thus far. And the rest of the year continued in similar fashion. Untitled Goose Game was a breakout indie success thanks to an extremely marketable core that really just hit internet culture in its weak spot. Monster Hunter World's expansion Iceborne gave Capcom another big win in their trophy cabinet, and then The Outer Worlds launched to acclaim and made a lot of people pretty happy. Then to round off the year, Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, that proved what a remaster could be. Resident Evil 2 perfected the remake, and Age of Empires perfected the remaster. Incredible quality of life changes, excellent new features, technical updates, while still keeping the original game intact. And of course, December also saw Halo Reach, as a part of the Master Chief Collection, hit PC. A big franchise coming to the PC. People have asked for that for so long, and they were given it, and it worked out really well. It's just a massive win for us. And then I'd say the last notable release of that period would be Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, right? That's a great game, and I think a lesson for EA. They trusted a talented team that were rapidly prototyping gameplay, and, they provided for a long-ignored audience who just wanted a good single-player experience. Not a new genre-defining game, but just a really solid experience, and that's what they got. So, that's the games, but what else happened? Well, I think we also saw what might be the start of the eventual death of loot boxes in at least our side of gaming. Between Battlefront 2's nightmarish launch and ever-increasing scrutiny, loot boxes saw less implementation than before this year. Even Modern Warfare, Call of Duty game, and just look at what Blops 4 turned into. Well, Modern Warfare launched without loot boxes. Instead, it just sold cosmetics and bundles to players. Of course, we've got to see if that actually holds, but when Activision's largest franchise forgoes loot boxes, you can see that maybe it'll be a big deal in the future, right? A big success for players. Now, yes, it's hard to say if this will ultimately be more profitable to them, or if they'll add loot boxes and update as they have before, or maybe if the industry, say, felt the gambling regulators actually peering over their shoulders. But either way, that menace, that of loot boxes, Well, maybe it'll remain strong in mobile games and in FIFA Ultimate Team, but it does seem like, at least in the core gaming market, we can maybe take a little breath of relief as I suppose we prepare for the next battle, because I'm sure the industry is going to try to roll out some form of BS to us in the future. Then, in a similar vein, there's another blow to those bad forms of monetization, and that's Riot's unveiling of their rather consumer-friendly Legends of Runeterra, right? Its business model really did feel like a call-out of other games that shamelessly use the randomized pack CCG model. Riot Games basically announced that, well, the current model is unfair, and that instead players should pick what cards they get. And I think if you work in the Hearthstone team, that must have hurt deeply to hear, and, well, frankly, it should, based on how Hearthstone monetizes. It actually bodes well, I think, if the industry is infighting in this regard. Yes, it does suit Riot to have customers on side, but it definitely is a mutually beneficial arrangement, at least in regards to the monetization. Now, early in the year, Bungie's split from Activision was another big positive story for us. A studio chained to their master schedule, well, they earned their freedom, and their game almost immediately improved for it. And while Destiny 2 still does have iffy parts, the now larger player base does seem to be satisfied with what Bungie has to offer at Bungie's own pace. Then moving past that, there's the subcategory of wins that are essentially the enemy's losses, right? Anthem released to a pretty much catastrophic failure. There's not much to celebrate for BioWare, but it was a colossal failure of EA's mismanagement, a reliance on crunch, and a development process that EA have since referenced when they were praising Fallen Order. Effectively, they developed it for awe factor and to look good in presentations, rather than to rapidly prototype the core gameplay of something that would actually be fun for players. And they've since learnt their lesson, if the LA Times article covering Zampella's new assignment is anything to go by. And really because of that, I do doubt that we'll see big, ambitious projects teased many years before they're ready this gen. Perhaps the industry will have learnt. Then, what are the more humorous failures next? Stadia. It pretty much collapsed out the gate as, the product of a pack of out-of-touch biz dev techies who were so caught up in their grand plans that they actually forgot the audience that they claimed to be serving with the product. And seeing such a terrible launch fail straight away is actually heartening, because it's going to allow things like xCloud and GeForce Now to shine for being successful variants that were actually focused on the consumer. Then next, there's another game release one here. Ubisoft had a severe embarrassment with Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and the end result is that, well, they've significantly delayed much of their upcoming catalogue, and they've tried to refocus on individual game quality. Now, it's kind of hard to wonder, or hard to reason why that actually wasn't the focus from the get-go, but if they're actually able to succeed in learning from that failure, then at the end of the day, it will be good for customers. So that's a good thing for us. Basically, right, when these publishers and developers make mistakes and the market punishes them for it, it's a short-term loss for gamers in terms of the quality of the games that we've got, but there's a potential long-term gain, because if they then decide to make decisions that better serve players, that's an absolute win. We'll just have to have a little bit of patience. Now, there were some other excellent events. 2019 was a great year for virtual reality. It really did go to the next level in a few regards. It's not for everyone, yes, but the Valve Index and the Oculus Quest opened up VR to the super invested customers who want quality, and also to a wider audience, with the two of them being very different product offerings. And between those headsets launching and the Alex announcement, well, 2019 was really a year that VR took off more. And with Alex's release this year, hopefully it will reach escape velocity and we'll see a whole new universe of VR content appear. I mean, if the history of technology repeats itself, VR should soon be coming out into the stage with better content and lower prices, which at the end of the day is good for consumers. Then, in the PC market in general, actually, 2019 saw AMD Zen 2 CPUs hit the market. What did that do? That drove up competition massively. And that means that it's a really good time to be building a PC.
So, bringing it all back, in general, most of our 2019 coverage was negative. That kind of is the nature of the news, but I'd say that the trick here is to not let that news cycle impact your own enjoyment of games, because for all of the doom and the gloom, our industry is growing and stronger niches are being formed. There are so many more incredible games these days. The indie scene is varied and vibrant, and smaller studios and publishers are actually growing to be very healthy. AAA games, for all of their issues, are struggling with their own scope, it seems, but perhaps once that is realized, maybe once the lessons of, say, Respawn are taken on board, well, maybe they'll even get better too. And while some of the magic of gaming in its earliest years hasn't really survived the modern transition, in many ways, games are better than ever. And even playing older games is a better experience now. Higher res, backwards compatibility, even some incredible remasters and re-releases that actually do make the experience, I would say, one that is more clear and appropriate for modern hardware. So, there you go. I think it was really important to just cover these things in the industry, especially now that we're actually a little bit past the 1-year anniversary of this channel. So it's been an exciting time. I hope that through this video you maybe found some games that you hadn't considered, that you didn't know about, that you now like to play. Because ultimately, while I do want to sit down here and do consumer advocacy content and talk about things that could be bad in the industry, there are also times where, oddly enough, I want you to leave our content actually feeling excited about games and there are fun things that you can go and do. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've got any recommendations of your own down below. And with that, I'll see you next time.